You ever walk past a place so dark it feels like God forgot it exists? That's where my story begins. Under Jefferson Street Bridge, where the city hides what it doesn't want tourists to see. If you're watching this right now, do me one favor, drop a heart in the comments, just so I know somebody out there still believes compassion isn't extinct. I'm Marian Ellison, 68 years old, founder of a shipping company most folks in Atlanta have seen on a truck, but never tied to my face. Retired, though I don't sit still. Every Thursday night, my foundation drives out with soup coats and a generator light to the bridge. I don't advertise it. I just show up because once upon a time, somebody showed up for me. That night was bone cold. January wind cutting through gloves. Volunteers moving fast before frost set in. We'd been out 3 hours when my flashlight landed on a small gray tent tucked behind a support column. A child's cough drifted out, dry and hollow. I pushed the flap back, ready with a blanket, and the world tilted. A woman sat on a milk crate, a boy and girl curled against her. Her cheeks were hollow, eyes guarded, but when she turned, I saw a scar that ran just under her chin, a scar I'd kissed after a childhood bike fall. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. "Nyla," I whispered. She blinked like someone waking from a long, cruel dream. Then she froze, truly froze, mouth parted. "You," her voice rasped. "They told me you died." Everything around us, the diesel smell, the traffic hum above, the shivering volunteers disappeared. 10 years of silence collapsed into that single sentence. "They told me you died." I crouched beside her. The girl, maybe 9, clutched a torn plush rabbit. The little boy couldn't have been more than 6. Their faces were too calm, children who'd learned early not to expect rescue. "Nyla, look at me." My voice came out steadier than my pulse. "I'm here. I'm alive." She backed up a step, disbelief twisting into shame. Don't pity me." Her eyes flicked toward the volunteers. "We're fine. We just need the night." Behind us, one of the city workers shouted that sanitation trucks would start clearing camps at dawn. I could hear metal doors slamming, dogs barking farther down. I knew what that meant. People's lives shoveled into dumpsters before sunrise. I turned to my driver. "Bring the van." Nyla shook her head. "You can't. You shouldn't be here." She pulled her kids close, voice breaking. "They said you died after the wedding. Daddy said the plane went down off Tampa." That was the moment my blood ran cold. Darius, he'd buried me before my time. I wanted to scream, to ask why she hadn't checked for herself, to demand who they really were. But one look at her children, their thin coats, their trusting eyes, and anger had to wait. First came rescue. "You're coming with me," I said quietly. "Tonight." "I can't." Her whisper was barely sound. Daddy isn't here. I cut in. Tomorrow morning these trucks will be. Choose which one you trust more." For a long second, she stared at me like a child testing a story she desperately wants to believe. Then she nodded once. The movement was so small, I almost missed it. We bundled the kids into the van, Nyla silent, jaw tight. As we pulled away, I looked back through the rear window at the bridge lights blurring past. Somewhere behind us, a bulldozer started its engine. I didn't know what story she'd been told, or how deep the lie went. All I knew was this: whatever killed me in their minds was about to come back to life. I studied her face. No lie, no play acting. She believed it. Someone had buried me with words, and she'd lived on top of that grave for 10 years. You never saw anything? I asked quietly. She shook her head. There was an obituary online. He showed me your photo, even the date. She bit her lip. I remember crying, but he said we shouldn't dwell on the dead. The cocoa trembled in her grip. I reached out to steady it, but she flinched before I could touch her. Hey, I said softly, you're safe here. For a moment, she stared past me at her sleeping children. You shouldn't have come, Grandma. People like you don't belong under bridges. People like me? Clean, she whispered. Unbroken. Her words hit harder than the cold. I'd been clean, yes, but not unbroken. My company, my reputation, my family, all burned once already in the fire her father lit. The van's headlights washed over the roadside shrubs. My volunteer, Denise, came up to the door. We'll head back soon, Ms. Ellison. City crews start clearing at 4. You sure you're okay? I nodded. Go on ahead. I'll follow. When she left, I turned back to Nyla. How long have you been here? She hesitated, then whispered, Since August. 3 months. She nodded. After I left Trent. The name fell like ice water down my spine. I hadn't spoken her husband's name since the day he'd promised to take good care of her. Nyla's eyes dropped. He wasn't who everyone thought he was. Controlling. Angry. I tried to leave 3 times. The last time, he locked my phone, canceled my cards. I took the kids and ran. I thought Daddy would help, but she stopped. But he didn't. I finished quietly. She laughed without humor. He told me I made my bed, said coming back would embarrass him. I felt something rise in me, a slow, deliberate fury I hadn't known in years. And so you stayed here with 2 children under a bridge. I didn't have papers or ID. Trent kept everything. Her voice cracked. Shelters said they were full. I just kept moving until I found this place. Outside, a sanitation truck rumbled by, its metal arms clanging against bins. The children stirred in their sleep, and Nyla bent to cover them. Her coat was threadbare. When she leaned forward, I saw the thin bruise ring around her wrist. Old restraint marks, faded but not forgotten. Look at me, I said quietly. She hesitated, then met my eyes. You think I came out here by accident? She frowned. What do you mean? I've been searching for you for a decade. I said, 10 years of dead ends and closed doors. They told me you moved overseas. Then they said you didn't want contact. None of it was true. I should have known he was behind it. Her lips trembled. Daddy, I didn't answer that. Not yet. Not when her voice still carried the softness of a daughter who believed she'd been loved. Instead, I held out my hand, palm up. Come home with me, Nyla. I've waited 10 years to bring you back. She stared at that hand for a long, shaking moment, like it was a bridge she didn't trust to hold her weight. The silence stretched, and then she reached out, fingers trembling, and touched mine. We pulled up to the tarmac just before midnight. Frost glittered on the runway lights, little constellations at our feet. The hangar crew spoke in quick, gentle voices, the way nurses speak in ICU rooms, efficient, careful, not a single word wasted. Nyla clutched the children's hands as if the wind might steal them. My pilot met us at the stairs with a wool blanket over her arm and a look that said, I see what this is, and I will treat it wholly. Inside, The jet felt like the first warm room after a storm. Not luxury, relief. I guided Nyla to the forward seats and watched her take in the space the way a person studies a foreign language, cautious, translating one sentence at a time. She didn't ask questions. She just kept her eyes on the kids. Zuri slid into the window seat and pressed her palm to the glass, tracing invisible shapes. Cairo climbed into the opposite chair and reached for my wrist, curious. "What's that?" he whispered. "A bracelet from when I retired," I said, unfastening it so he could spin the clasp. His fingers were small and sure, the way boys' hands get when they've learned to fix things no one should have broken. The engines woke with a low, steady hum that vibrated through the floor and settled into our bones. Zuri opened a notebook and began sketching the runway lights as dots and dashes across a page of night. Her lines were delicate but certain. I recognized that certainty. It's what survival does to the hand. It teaches it to draw without shaking. Nyla finally exhaled, slow and rough, like a person stepping off a tightrope. "I haven't flown since a long time," she murmured. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She knew I could hear everything she didn't say. I buckled in across from her. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber that made everyone look a little kinder. The door sealed. The world narrowed to a room with 4 beating hearts and a promise I intended to keep. We lifted, and the city loosened its grip. Bridges and highways smeared into ribbons, the river a blade of black below us. Cairo giggled when the nose pitched up, eyes wide, bracelet clinking softly between his palms. Zuri drew the climb as a curve through the stars and added a tiny figure at the bottom with a blanket over her shoulders. "Is that you?" I asked. She nodded. "Is the blanket heavy?" Another nod. "Heavy is good," she said. "Heavy means warm." I swallowed hard. "Yes, baby. Heavy means warm." Across from me, Nyla was studying my face the way a child studies a photograph to find what pieces they carry. In her gaze, I felt the echo of a wedding day. White silk, a garden strung with lights, the way she had laughed when the cake knife slipped. I also felt everything after. The unanswered calls, the letters that came back stamped undeliverable, the quiet birthdays where I laid a single place at my table anyway. I didn't share any of that now. Rescues should not be crowded with regrets. My pilot called back over her shoulder, "Wheels up and smooth. Savannah and 42. Nyla flinched at the voice, then settled. "Is it far?" she asked. "It's close enough to rest," I said. She nodded, fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve. "Do they know we left?" "No one knows anything tonight except us," I answered. "That's the point." She watched the dark for a while, then turned to the children. "We're safe," she said quietly, as if testing whether the words could stand. Cairo, satisfied with the bracelet, leaned against the armrest and yawned. Zuri finished her drawing, tore the page carefully, and slid it across the table to me. A crooked moon, a small plane, 4 dots inside. Beneath it, she'd written in block letters, "We are up." "We are," I said, and tucked the paper into my handbag like a treaty. When the cabin lights dimmed further for landing, Nyla's silhouette softened. The lines of tension across her forehead eased 1 notch, then another. She touched the window with the back of her fingers, as if to bless the night we were passing through. I watched her, my granddaughter, the child I'd last seen surrounded by cheers and vows, now strapped into a seat with nothing but a duffel and 2 sleeping miracles. The engines throttled back. The runway lights gathered into a path. She didn't know it yet, but dawn would find her in a bed with a door that locked from the inside, and a closet with hangers that didn't bruise. She didn't know that in a drawer at the estate waited a photograph she had never been allowed to keep. I held that knowledge like a lantern I wasn't ready to lift. The wheels kissed the earth. The cabin sighed, and I thought, clear as scripture, now she deserves to know what they did to her. The last time I saw her, the garden smelled like sugar and lemon peel. Lights were strung through live oaks, and the quartet kept missing their cue because everyone was crying. Nyla stood in her gown like a lantern, soft gold on soft skin. Trent Caldwell smiling beside her. They way men smile when the contract just cleared. I kissed her forehead and told her to keep a piece of cake in the freezer for luck. She laughed, promised she would, and then the night swallowed our goodbyes like confetti down a drain. That was the final clean memory before everything went paper and static. After the wedding, my calls started ringing longer before they fell into voicemail. I tried not to fuss. Newlyweds learn new clocks. Then a receptionist at the Caldwell office took my message and never returned it. Then a security guard at their gate said, "They're not taking visitors." When I sent flowers, the florist delivered them back to my foyer with a neat note. Order refused. NO forwarding address. I sent a letter instead, handwritten, my best pen, the ink that doesn't smear. Call me when you're up. It returned with a yellow sticker, undeliverable. I tried again with registered mail, signed for and returned unopened. My name crossed out, the word reassigned stamped where a person's address should have been. It felt like arguing with a wall that had learned to read. I told myself to be pragmatic. People get busy. Families reorganize. So I went to the Caldwell place in Jacksonville on a breezy Thursday in late spring, wearing the Navy suit that says, "I am not here to cause a scene." At the gate, the same guard checked a clipboard and tilted his head as if listening to someone in his earpiece. "Mrs. Ellison, Ms. Caldwell isn't accepting guests," he said. "She's resting." Ms. Caldwell, not Nyla. I left a wrapped cookbook for her, a silly tradition from our kitchen days, then drove 2 blocks, parked, and waited. No one came out. My assistant, Rhea, is the sort who keeps proof that proof exists. She began logging every attempt, time-stamped calls, mailing receipts, dates. I stopped eating lunch because grief is greedy and likes to eat first. When I finally hired a private investigator, Rhea opened a fresh file. The man I retained had the bland tan of someone whose job is to be forgettable. He brought back a summary in a slim folder. Phones reassigned, utilities in corporate names, public appearances controlled by a family office. He said, "They've built a fence out of paperwork." He meant they could move her by signature. The first truly loud silence came on Nyla's birthday. I sent a bracelet, simple, small, with the year etched inside. It came back crushed into a padded envelope, the box flattened as if someone had stepped on it. I kept the dented thing anyway, like a fossil of a day that should have had a cake in it. When I did catch a live voice, once, only once, it was a woman who said she handled Mrs. Caldwell's schedule. I asked for 5 minutes on a Sunday, a window, a doorway, a crack. She asked me to hold, then returned with a tone as cool as a marble counter. "Mrs. Caldwell appreciates your concern," she said, "but she is building her new life and requests privacy." There was something rehearsed about the sentence, the way it landed perfectly on the period. I am not a woman who loves the camera, but I know how to use a spotlight when I have to. I went to a luncheon where Trent's father sat on a dais and spoke about heritage. After, I waited at the hedge like a polite ghost. "She's well," he said, eyes already sliding away. "Let her be." I asked him to pass along a note. He took it between two fingers as if it were damp. Years bled into each other. Every quarter, Rhea and I tried again, alternating kindness with insistence. We stopped sending gifts. Everything came back mauled. We switched to postcards. Some never returned. Some did, with our address circled and a question mark like a smirk. Tonight, after wheels touched down and the children were carried in and the hallway lamps made a warm path to the guest rooms, Rhea met me in my study with a stack of boxes. Old attempts, dead trails. She set down the investigator's original folder on top. "There's something you should see," she said, tapping the final page. It was a memo, internal, dated 9 years ago, 2 months after the wedding. "All inquiries re. N. Caldwell to be routed to D. Ellison for disposition." Beneath it, another note from the same investigator scrawled in pencil, "Every trail you opened back then was shut down by your son." My throat closed around air. The lights hummed. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard settled like a sigh. I set both hands on the desk to keep the room from tilting, and to no one but the truth, I whispered, "He made sure I'd never find her." Some truths don't break you when you hear them. They break you when you realize someone rehearsed them for years. That morning, with sunlight just starting to creep across the breakfast table, I decided my granddaughter would finally know who she'd really married. And why. She sat across from me, wrapped in one of my old cardigans, hair damp from the shower. The children were still asleep upstairs. I poured tea, but neither of us drank. I could see questions flickering behind her eyes, but fear kept them silent. She thought her father was heartless. She didn't know he was calculated. "Nyla," I said quietly, "when your father left the company, it wasn't voluntary." Her gaze lifted. "He told me you pushed him out. He told everyone that. The truth is he was caught misusing company funds. I offered him help, not punishment, but pride and greed are twins. You feed one, the other grows fatter." I turned the teacup slowly between my palms, remembering the day my son's temper eclipsed the man I raised. Flashback. The office smelled of toner and betrayal. I had called him in after the auditors found the discrepancies. "Darius, you've been moving money through dummy vendors," I said, sliding the reports across my desk. He didn't even blink. He only straightened his tie. "It's called liquidity," he said. "You wouldn't understand." "Liquidity isn't theft," I replied. "Return it, step down quietly, and I'll handle the press." His jaw tightened. "You'd humiliate your own son. I'd protect the company I built." That's when he said it, calm and cruel. "Maybe you should let someone else handle the family business, someone who remembers what family means." A week later, he was gone. When the flashback dissolved, I looked at Nilo again. "Your father went straight to the Caldwells. They were old clients, powerful, very Southern, obsessed with appearances. He offered them what he thought I'd never sell." Nyla frowned. "Offered what?" "You." The word sat between us, too heavy to move. Her fingers tightened around the mug. "That's not." I slid a manila folder across the table. Inside, a photocopy of a contract, my son's signature below, a line labeled Family Alliance Agreement. Attached was a wire transfer, $4 million routed to a holding company Darius had opened the same month. Her voice shrank to a whisper. That's the year I got engaged. He told the Caldwells he'd give them access to my network, investors, political donors. In return, they'd secure his debts and elevate his name back into polite society. But he needed leverage, a way to prove his loyalty. That leverage was you. Nyla pushed back from the table, shaking her head. He loved me. He loved the idea of you, I said, a bargaining chip that looked like blood. Flashback again. I remember driving to his house after hearing rumors about the engagement. He was packing for a flight, smug in his own reinvention. You can't do this to her, I told him. She's not a contract. He didn't even pause. It's business, Mother. She'll live better than any of us. That sentence had carved itself into me. I'd stood there, watching him close the suitcase, knowing the door he was about to shut would stay shut for a decade. Back in the present, Nyla's breathing went uneven. He told me marrying Trent would protect the family's future. It protected his reputation. I said, not yours. Her shoulders trembled. So when you called and I never answered, he already knew you were trying to warn me? I nodded. He made sure I couldn't reach you. Every phone line, every investigator, shut down by his authorization. Nyla reached for the folder again, stared at the paper like it could still change. The quiet stretched between us, long and cruel. Then she whispered, all those years, I thought love arranged my life. It was just a transaction. I leaned forward, touching her hand gently, my voice steady but soft enough to crack. Your marriage wasn't love, baby. It was a sale. Silence has a sound when it breaks. It's the air remembering how to move. That's what filled the study when I spread the papers across the desk. Contracts don't cry, but if you read them long enough, you'll hear the people they ruined. Nyla sat stiff in the armchair, still in yesterday's clothes. Her hands were clasped so tightly I could see the pulse flickering between her knuckles. I turned the first page. The ink had faded at the edges, but the signatures were crisp. Darius Ellison, black pen, confident, expensive. Beneath it, Randall Caldwell, senior managing partner. The line that mattered was the one stamped family partnership agreement. It valued the union at $4 million payable in tranches contingent upon the continued harmonious relationship between both families. I looked at her. That money kept him alive. I said, your father's empire was rotting. This deal was his tourniquet. She blinked as if trying to unsee the words. So my wedding wasn't a ceremony. It was a contract signing. I nodded once. And the honeymoon, it wasn't your gift. It was the Caldwell's verification trip to make sure he delivered what he promised. Her breath caught. Delivered. Access, loyalty, and silence. I said, he sold all three. Zuri patted in before I could hide the folder. She was barefoot, hair messy from her nap. Grandma, she murmured, rubbing her eyes. I heard Mommy crying. Nyla wiped her face quickly. I'm okay, baby. Go back upstairs. But Zuri had already seen the pages. Her small fingers landed on one. What's a sale? She asked, eyes wide. The word hit like a blade, twisting slow. Nyla opened her mouth, then closed it again. I forced a smile. Something grown-ups do when they trade things they shouldn't. Zuri frowned, nodded, and went back toward the hall. The moment she disappeared, Nyla exhaled a sound that wasn't quite a sob. Not yet. I slid the documents closer. This clause right here, mutual benefits secured through consolidation of assets. That's you? Nyla, you were the asset. They consolidated you. Her eyes darted over the lines, each phrase a bruise waiting to bloom. Transfer of non-equity assets, guaranteed endorsement, personal alliance. It was all there, legal and polite. The language of betrayal dressed for Sunday church. I remember the night before the wedding. She whispered, "Daddy said I was our future. I thought he meant I was loved. He meant you were leverage." I said. She pressed her palms to her eyes. All those dinners, all those toasts, they were celebrating a transaction. The Caldwells needed new money, I continued. He needed their influence. And I stopped myself. I tried to stop it. He threatened to cut ties entirely if I interfered. Said I was jealous of his success. Her shoulders began to shake. He told me, "You didn't come to the engagement because you didn't approve of Trent." I wasn't invited. I said. The envelope came back torn in half. Her face changed then. The disbelief gave way to something darker, recognition, like a door she'd avoided finally swinging open. So every fight between Trent and me, every time his parents called me ungrateful, they already knew I wasn't a wife to them. I was payment cleared. The wind shifted outside, pressing against the window panes. Somewhere down the hall, the children's laughter floated faintly, innocent, and oblivious. Nyla stared at the papers again, fingers trembling over her father's signature. "He looked me in the eye the day I left that house," she said slowly, "and told me family always protects its own." I touched her hand. He did. He just never said who counted as family. For a heartbeat, the room felt too small to hold what was unraveling. Then she shoved the chair back, standing so suddenly the papers fluttered to the floor. Her voice broke open. "So he traded me for investors?" The question hung there, terrible and alive, and all I could do was nod, because the truth was worth more than comfort, and she deserved both someday. Some rooms are designed to swallow sound. The Caldwell drawing room was one of them. Thick carpets, heavy drapes, wood that drank every syllable until even a yes came out tasting like permission. I asked Nyla to walk me through that house, not the floor plan, the rules. She sat at my study window, palms around a mug she didn't drink, and stared into a morning too clean to hold what she was about to say. The first week, she began, "They took my phone for security. Trent said we'd get new numbers when the family office set things up." He liked to say family office a lot. It made cruelty sound like policy. She gave a brittle smile. Breakfast was at 8. If I came at 8:03, his mother placed a napkin where my plate should have been and said, "We keep order here, dear." At night, doors clicked. Not locked, not exactly, just closed with the kind of careful that meant "don't try me." I slid a pad across the desk so Rhea, my attorney, could mark timelines without interrupting. Nyla didn't notice. I asked about work, painting a small studio. Trent said we'd revisit it after the first quarter of events. That quarter lasted for years. She traced a circle on the mug with her thumb. He liked to talk about my posture. Shoulders down, chin up, smile when the donors' wives make jokes. He'd squeeze the back of my arm under the table if I forgot. Rhea lifted a page from the file and pointed to a clause in the partnership agreement. Public comportment standards. Correction at host discretion. I met her eyes. She underlined it once. Visitors? I asked gently. Scheduled. Nyla said, vetted. If my friends called, the house manager said I was resting. If I wrote letters, the family office mailed them. I don't think any reached the people I sent them to. Sometimes I'd leave notes in the pockets of clothes going to the cleaners. I never heard back. I figured I wasn't brave enough or clever enough. Turns out I wasn't sanctioned enough. She swallowed. He had a smile for the outside. You know the kind. The one people line up to be near. I learned the weather report of his jaw. If it clenched left, dinner would end early. If it clenched right, someone had embarrassed him. Usually me. She lifted the hem of her sleeve and showed a faint crescent scar near the elbow. Crystal Place card holder. I moved the wrong name. Rhea flipped to another page. Host maintains guest list and seating preferences. Deviations corrected immediately. The word immediately had been bolded by a careful, soulless hand. She circled it. Slow. What did you do with your hours? I asked. Counted them, she said. Wrote grocery lists. I never shopped. Practiced smiling in the guest bathroom because it had the best light. Drew houses on scrap paper, little ones with porches and a single lamp on. Sometimes I hid in the laundry room and folded things nobody asked me to touch, just to feel like my hands belonged to me. She blinked hard, then let the rest fall out. When I told Trent I wanted to visit you, he said, "We don't speak ill of the dead." When I said I didn't believe it, he said, "Believe the life you have." And when I cried too loudly, his mother took my face in both hands and said, "Hush now. Men do business. Women make it look pretty." She looked at me, shame and fury sharing a single chair behind her eyes. They liked me best when I had no voice. Rhea slid another printout across the desk. Emails from the house manager to the family office. Subject, noise. The message, remind N of comportment. Donor brunch in 3 days. Attached was a schedule labeled visibility plan. There were color blocks, green for public facing, yellow for prepare, red for disappear. What's red? I asked. Nyla didn't blink. When someone more valuable was in the room. The air thinned. I reached for steadiness the way you reach for a railing in a stairwell you can't see. And your father? I said, when he visited. He didn't visit, she said. He arrived. Her mouth twisted. They brought out the good china. He liked to put a hand on my shoulder like he was steadying me, then take it away before anyone could call it love. He called me asset once, stopped himself, said asset to the family. I pretended not to notice the edit. Rhea found a final clause and drew a rectangle around it, non-competition/non-communication. Beneath, the line that made something in me go very still. No direct contact to parties whose influence may disrupt harmonious consolidation. Handwritten beside the clause in tidy blue ink, M.E. He'd written my initials where the threat should go. I closed the folder. The house was quiet enough to hear Zuri turn in her sleep down the hall. Nyla watched my face and understood before I spoke that the agreement hadn't just arranged her life. It had erased me by design. I leaned forward, steady and plain. You weren't meant to marry him. I said, you were meant to disappear. Some lies need paper to live. The one that buried me came printed on thick stock, serif font, tasteful gray border. Expensive grief. It was late afternoon when I showed her. The study curtains were half drawn, the light thin and gold. Nyla sat on the couch with a quilt across her knees, the children upstairs watching cartoons too softly for me to hear. I slid the manila envelope across the table. She hesitated before opening it, like she already knew whatever waited inside would change the shape of her memories. "Read the headline," I said. Her fingers unfolded the yellowing page. The newspaper logo at the top, the Atlanta Gazette, dated 8 years earlier. The words below it looked almost elegant. "Business icon Marion Ellison dies at 60 in tragic car accident on I-75. Beneath that, a photo cropped from an old company profile, the same one we'd used when we launched the Women's Logistics Initiative. My eyes were bright in that picture, my hand mid-gesture, alive, explaining something. Nyla's lips parted. You didn't know about this." "I didn't, not until 3 years ago," I said. "A journalist friend found it while researching an anniversary piece about my company. She called me, terrified she'd spoken to a ghost." I remembered that call. A Tuesday, I'd been watering orchids on the porch when the phone buzzed. "Marion, this is going to sound insane," she'd said, "but did you die in 2015? Now, in my study, I placed the second page beside the obituary, a state-issued death certificate complete with seal and physician signature. "Darius filed this," I said. I recognized the notary's stamp. She worked for the family office back then. Nyla's hands trembled. Why would he? To erase me, I cut in. The Caldwell's contract had a morality clause. If I objected publicly to your marriage, it could void the deal and cost them millions. A dead mother can't interfere. Rhea, my attorney, stepped forward with her tablet. There's more. The obituary ran in 3 local papers and 1 national business digest. Same wording, same submission IP address. All linked to a Caldwell media liaison. Nyla's voice thinned to disbelief. So they all knew. "They approved it," I said. "The journalist pulled archived emails between their PR director and your father. The subject line read Scandal Mitigation Plan." I tapped the printouts. "Here, proceed with simulated fatality notice. Verify non-public circulation outside Georgia. Maintain narrative until acquisition completion." Their lawyer replied, "Understood. Best for all parties." Nyla pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes filling. "Best for all parties. Like you were an event to manage." I was a liability. I said quietly, "Dead, I became an asset again." She looked back at the article. People believed it. "Oh, they sent flowers." I said, "Former colleagues, even a senator." I still have the sympathy cards. I wanted to scream when they came, but screaming would have proved I was alive. The absurdity had nearly killed me the first time, seeing my own memorial online, messages of loss from strangers. The caption under my photo read, "A visionary whose life was a testament to discipline and dignity." I'd laughed until my throat burned. Nyla ran a thumb along the crease of the page. "And Daddy showed me this. Said the crash happened after a board retreat. He told me to say you died peacefully." The word peacefully tasted like ash. She looked up at me, eyes red. "He made me stand at your grave. Grandma, a fake one." There was a plaque. I froze. A plaque. In the Caldwell's garden. Small, by the fountain. in loving memory of Marian Ellison. He said it helped him grieve. For a heartbeat, I couldn't speak. The only sound was the clock ticking behind me, marking the seconds of a decade I'd lost to paperwork. Nyla's hands were shaking so hard the paper rustled. The headline seemed to pulse with every breath she took. Finally, she whispered it aloud, the way you recite something sacred and wrong at the same time. Business icon Marian Ellison dies at 60. She stared at the words until her voice cracked. They didn't just bury you. They built a world where I had to live without you in it. You ever chase a ghost that keeps changing its name? That's what it felt like searching for my own blood. Every lead began with hope and ended with a locked door. Every name I trusted found its way back to Darius. Nyla sat across from me in the den that evening, her knees pulled up, a blanket folded over her legs. She listened as I finally told her the truth of the years between us, the decade that swallowed everything we could have been. After your wedding, when you vanished, I didn't stop looking. I began. Not for a month, not for a year. I hired investigators. Good ones. Rhea came in quietly and placed an old leather folder on the coffee table. Its edges were soft from handling, but the weight of it made the wood creak. These are the files. I told her. Every name, every check I wrote, every trail that went cold. The first page was a receipt from a private security firm in Miami, dated the year after Nyla's wedding. Beneath it, a stack of progress reports. Short, clipped, professionalized, subject relocated. Contact not possible. I even posted scholarships in your name. I said, anonymous ones. I thought if you saw your name on something good, you'd find a way to reach me. I wanted you to know you weren't forgotten. Nyla blinked, her lashes wet. Scholarships. For women leaving restrictive marriages, I said. You inspired every one of them. She smiled weakly. That's how you found me under the bridge, isn't it? Still trying to save people. Still trying to make sense of losing one. I whispered. Rhea unfolded another document, an old email printout. This came from the embassy contact in London. She sent 2 letters to the Caldwell's address. Both were returned by a legal representative. Same pattern in Paris, New York, even Johannesburg. Nyla frowned. He moved us that much. Constantly, I said, every time I found a lead, you were gone. I didn't know then that every investigator I hired reported directly to him. Her head snapped up. What? Rhea tapped the next page, typed confession signed just last week. A former investigator finally came forward after we reopened the file. He said Darius paid him double to drop the case and feed you dead ends. The memory of that phone call still scraped raw. I'd answered thinking it was spam, then heard a man's trembling voice. Mrs. Ellison, I can't sleep. I have a ledger with your name on it. He paid me twice what you did to walk away. Nyla stared at the confession, hands shaking. So, he knew you were still looking. He made sure of it. I said, every new contact, lawyer, journalist, anyone who tried to help, he reached them first. Told them I was unstable. Said you were rebuilding abroad and didn't want interference. One of them even sent me a cease and desist letter. She flinched. From my own father? His lawyer's signature. I said, you were unreachable, Nyla. Not lost, managed. She turned to the window, breathing hard, staring at the reflection of herself, holding that file. All this time, I thought maybe I'd done something wrong, that you just moved on. I wanted to touch her shoulder, but I didn't. I sent letters to your husband's firm, gifts for your children when I heard rumors they'd been born. I even wrote one addressed simply to the woman who once loved my son. I never got a single reply. Her voice broke on a whisper because he intercepted them. I nodded. He didn't just hide you, Nyla. He erased the possibility of me. For a long moment, the only sound was the clock. Then she looked down at the papers again, at her father's signature looping across a decade of silence. When she finally spoke, it wasn't to me, it was to the space between her hands, to the little girl she used to be. Her voice came out small, cracked, certain. He didn't just hide me, she said. He erased me. Some wars don't start with shouting. They start with a whisper that sounds like strategy. By the time the sun rose over Savannah the next morning, my whisper had turned into a plan. Nyla stood at the kitchen counter, sleeves rolled, frying eggs for the children. It was the first morning I'd heard her hum, a cracked little tune, but music all the same. I watched her move like someone relearning gravity. 3 weeks in a warm house had softened the edges of her fear, but beneath her calm, I could see the kindling starting to gather. After breakfast, I handed her a small folder labeled Ellison Haven Network. You'll start here, I said. Therapy sessions, community work, women like you, strong, but trying to remember it. She opened it hesitantly. I don't want pity, Grandma. It's not pity, I said. It's rehearsal. You can't fight while you're still bleeding. That afternoon, she sat in a circle of women at the shelter, their chairs close enough that their knees almost touched. One woman had a faded bruise near her temple. Another spoke with a tremor that wasn't quite fear anymore. Nyla listened, then spoke. Her story came out quiet at first, broken phrases, no names. But as the hours passed, the fragments found rhythm. When she came home, her face looked lighter. They believed me, she said, almost in wonder. They didn't flinch. I smiled. Now, you know why I built that place. It's where the broken learn the language of strength again. In the evenings, we worked. Rhea turned my study into a war room, whiteboards covered in names, arrows, and corporate ties. Nyla sat beside me with a highlighter, tracing every Caldwell subsidiary, every charity front, every fake invoice Darius had touched. When Rhea suggested we go straight to the media, I shook my head. We won't scream. We'll stage. Nyla frowned. Stage what? A reckoning. I said, their world runs on image. We'll ruin it from within. I told her what I'd learned long ago. People like the Caldwells don't fear prison. They fear dinner tables that stop inviting them. Their weakness is reputation, and our weapon would be truth served cold. Over the next month, the house buzzed like a hidden newsroom. Nyla attended therapy twice a week, then came home to help organize files. She started sleeping through the night again. Zuri began painting in the sunroom. Cairo followed Rhea around pretending to be her assistant. For the first time, laughter belonged in this house again. One evening, Nyla came into the study carrying a stack of old newspapers. Look at this, she said, flipping through a glossy spread. The Caldwell Foundation hosts annual Women's Empowerment Gala. The headline dated back 8 years, the same week my obituary had run. My breath caught. They use my death week to brand empowerment. Nyla's mouth hardened. They do this every year. Apparently, I said, same month, same week. They call it renewal season. Rhea checked her laptop. This year's gala is in 9 weeks, she said. Theme, resilience and legacy. I almost laughed. Resilience. They wouldn't know it if it built their roof. Nyla leaned forward, eyes sharp in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager painting murals in my old garage. Then let's crash it. Her tone wasn't anger, it was conviction. The same quiet power I'd felt when I first saw her under that bridge now turned into fuel. We'll need evidence, Rhea said cautiously. Oh, we have it, I replied. We just need timing. We began sketching out the plan, document trails, hidden recordings, and the one thing they valued most, their audience. But this time, the audience wouldn't applaud. It would watch. When the room finally fell silent, Nyla stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the moon rise over the water. You think they'll ever see us coming? She asked. I smiled. They won't be looking down. The wind rattled the glass. Somewhere across the city, a newspaper printer rolled to life, already preparing next week's headlines. We would write our own soon. Just before turning off the lights, Rhea glanced at her phone and said, quietly, they've announced the date. The Caldwell's Charity Gala, 2 months from today. Nyla's reflection met mine in the glass. The corners of her mouth lifted, not in joy, but in justice waiting to be served. The perfect stage, I murmured. If revenge had a smell, it would be ink and toner. For weeks, the house sounded like an engine of quiet fury, printers humming, laptops clicking, papers whispering across polished wood. Every document we touched felt like another bone of the lie cracking open. Nyla sat beside me at the long dining table, a laptop glowing soft blue against her face. On the screen, columns of numbers scrolled like code only the guilty could write. These deposits, she murmured, they're from my wedding week. Rhea leaned over her shoulder, all routed through 3 shell accounts, all under Caldwell Enterprises. The same routing number appears in your father's name 6 months later. I rubbed my temple. The money never left the family. It just changed its mask. The first stack we printed was bank records, trails that started with my company's missing funds and ended in Trent's corporate empire. The second stack was marriage documentation, the family partnership agreement stamped with seals from notaries who no longer existed. The third stack, the hardest to hold, was mine, a forged death certificate, an obituary, and a condolence letter signed by a Caldwell publicist who had toasted me at that wedding 10 years ago. I looked at Nyla. This is what they built their empire on. Your signature and my silence. She didn't flinch this time. She reached for the papers with steady hands. Then let's start talking. Every night, she worked until her fingers cramped, highlighting dates and notes that might matter. Some evenings I'd find her in the den with Zuri. The two of them crouched over sketchbooks. Zuri had stopped drawing after the bridge. The first night she picked up a pencil again, Nyla sat quietly beside her, not directing, just matching her strokes. The paper filled with soft blues and browns, a bridge, clouds, and a woman holding a child's hand. You draw what you survive. Nyla told her gently, it reminds you that you made it through. In the next room, Rhea handled the grown-up version of art. Proof. She dug deep enough to find digital fingerprints, emails between Darius and Caldwell accountants, notes about trust consolidation, and family stabilization payments. She'd even traced a memo from 8 years ago that read simply, confirm Emmy estate remains inactive. The initials still made my stomach turn. We cataloged everything into folders labeled fraud, obstruction, defamation, motive. The names alone were enough to keep me warm at night. Then, one evening near midnight, Nyla's phone buzzed with a number she hadn't seen in years. She froze. "It's Dolores," she whispered. "The housemaid." I motioned for her to answer. "Miss Nyla." The voice on the other end was older now, thinner but still kind. "I shouldn't be calling, but I heard things. I saw your name in the news last month, your grandmother's charity gala announcement. Thought maybe you were free." Nyla swallowed. "I am now." Dolores hesitated. "Your husband, well, ex-husband, they still talk about you like you're a line item, baby. Mr. Trent said just last week. Her dowry built this empire. I recorded it. Figured you might need to hear how they remember you." Nyla covered her mouth. The sound somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. "He said that. I'll send the file." Dolores said quickly, "But I can't be tied to this. They're watching everything. Emails, phone lines, even church donations. You didn't hear this from me." "We understand," I said, taking the phone gently. "You've done more than you know." There was a pause. "Then listen close, ma'am," Dolores whispered, her voice dropping low. "They're expecting another payout from your son soon. A big one. Something about closing the circle." The line went dead. Nyla looked at me, pale. "Another payout. What circle?" I stared at the folder labeled motive, my pulse tightening. "They're not done," I said quietly. And for the first time since I found her under that bridge, Nyla's eyes didn't just hold pain. They held purpose. Rich people hang curtains over their mess and call it philanthropy. If you want to find the mess, pull the curtain gently. We started with silk. I moved first. Anonymity is a better weapon than anger. So I wired a quiet 6 figures through a donor-advised fund with a name that means nothing and everything, Magnolia Resilience Trust. It came with a single stipulation, visibility. The Caldwells adore visibility. It makes their lives look like glass. The event coordinator called within 2 hours. "Your trust will be recognized at the gala. Ms. Use M. Resilience." I said, "No speech, just placement." Placement is a boardroom word for power. Rhea secured the rest. A table against the center aisle, sight lines to the stage, and production collaboration, rights for the tribute montage. I didn't need the mic. I wanted the screen. While I laid the floor, Nyla set the trap. She created a new email, new number, new name, and Leighton, founder of a small arts fund for women rebuilding their lives. The story wasn't false. It was the truth with new shoes. She wrote the Caldwell's new women's foundation and offered to underwrite a mother-daughter program with a 7-figure pledge contingent on a personal briefing with their executive director. 10 minutes later, she had a reply. "Delighted. Tomorrow at 10. We booked a conference room at a boutique hotel with good light and discreet cameras. My outreach videographer came in as tech for a virtual donor dial-in. Hidden under the runner, he set a matchbox-sized recorder, the pendant on Nyla's neck. A tiny compass I'd given her that morning held a second microphone. "Breathe," I told her in the hall. "You're not asking them for anything. You're measuring them." She nodded, shoulders squared, a posture I recognized from the girl who once painted a mural until her fingers bled and then laughed about the color stuck to her nails. The executive director, sleek, centered, impeccably moisturized, arrived with a development officer whose smile had a calculator behind it. They loved Nyla within 30 seconds. Money makes everyone charming. We're passionate about survivors, the director said, but optics are delicate. Nyla tilted her head. Innocent. Optics. We prefer stories with clean endings, the woman said. Resilience sells. And the messy parts? Nyla asked softly. We keep those in-house, the development officer said, not missing a beat. Partnerships thrive on discretion, especially when families are involved. I watched through a split-screen feed in the hotel business center, knuckles white on the chair back. Discretion. In-house. The words people like them use when they mean silence. Would your foundation partner with donors linked to complicated reputations? Nyla asked, voice casual. The director smiled. We believe in redemption through association. Translation. If the check clears, the sin washes. Our board includes leaders who understand legacy. The officer added, tapping her tablet. One of our closest partners is Mr. Ellison. He'll be at the gala with his partners. My lungs forgot their job for a beat. Rhea leaned in, eyes sparking. Get her to say more, she whispered, as if the air could carry instructions. Nyla didn't need them. I prefer clarity before committing, she said. What kind of involvement does Mr. Ellison have? The development officer's smile sharpened. He's a bridge. He helps us keep delicate histories out of print. Families deserve dignity. The word dignity rang like a bell struck with a bone. Nyla blinked slowly, as if measuring a purchase. And if a donor's past conflicts with the foundation's mission, the director folded her hands. We raise the ceiling for women. We don't lower it for gossip. Rhea muttered, there it is. Hypocrisy, captured in perfect light. They broke for water. In the hall, Nyla texted 3 words. They welcomed me. We didn't celebrate. We listened. Back in the room, the officer leaned forward, confidential now. If your pledge is firm, we can offer stage acknowledgement next to Mr. Ellison. Imagine the narrative, a survivor supporting survivors. Next to, not behind. They loved optics. They would seat the woman he sold alongside him and call it healing. Across town, my phone pinged with an alert, a social post from Darius, cufflinks, a tuxedo sleeve, and the caption, honored to attend with my partners. Legacy requires courage. I laughed once, not from humor. Courage never needed escorts. Rhea angled the feed, so I could see Nyla's face as she closed the meeting. Calm, gracious, lethal. I'll finalize with my board this week, she said, rising. Hands were shaken, promises floated like perfume, and the door clicked shut behind them. The videographer retrieved the pendant mic, heart racing. We got it, he said. Clean audio, clean faces, clean consent to record per posted signage. Legal, visible, undeniable. Back at the house, I queued the wire transfers and signed the final event contract. The donor wall would list Magnolia Resilience at the top. The tribute reel would accept our archival footage. Security would triple on the main floor. We had already met with them. I closed my laptop, looked at the woman my son had tried to file away, and felt something ancient click into place, like a lock remembering its key. Darius had announced himself. The Caldwells had welcomed our money and our story without recognizing our names. And we had their voices, their values, their vanity on tape. I let the breath out slow and smiled, not sweet, sharp. Good, I said. The stage is set. You want a crazy confession? The most honest room in a city is a ballroom right before the lies start. Breathe it in, perfume over fear, ice over nerves, money pretending to be mercy. Tonight, I walked into a room that once buried me on paper, a room that would soon remember the dead don't stay silent. The Caldwell Grand was all chandeliers and certainty, rows of tables fanned toward a crescent stage trimmed in magnolia and gold. Along the back wall, donor names glowed in white, Magnolia Resilience Trust at the top, exactly where we paid to place it. Violinists sawed polite triumph. Laughter loosened wallets. And on the production deck, our files sat in the queue with a title bland enough to pass any glance. Legacy Tribute, Final. I stayed in the corridor behind the stage, hands calm, pulse not. Beside me, Nyla stood in a simple black dress that made her look like a verdict written clean. She held Zuri's hand. Small fingers, fierce grip. You ready? I asked. Nyla nodded once. Zuri lifted her, chin the way children do when they decide to be brave on purpose. The host began his script, Resilience Community, Women Who Rise. He thanked a visionary bridge builder, and the crowd applauded before he finished the name. Darius took his bow at his table. Tuxedo, cufflinks, the mouth of a man who believes cameras are mirrors. Trent sat 2 seats over, jaw set in that public kindness he wore like cologne. Their wives sparkled, the way people do when they think light loves them. And now the host smiled, our annual legacy tribute. Lights dipped, screens woke. The first images were exactly what their team expected. Slow pans of ribbon cuttings, sepia photos of church picnics, the Caldwell matriarch watering roses like the town's spine grew from her hose. A murmur of reverence settled. Then the cut. A cursor blinked, tiny as a heartbeat. The frame shifted to a scanned contract, family partnership agreement, dates crisp, signatures darker than memory. I heard the room register it, the collective that comes when admiration trips. The next frame, bank wires, account pads spidering across the screen with a transparency only guilt should fear. A red arrow traced the money from my company to their shells to his pocket. Numbers don't tremble. People do. I felt the first tremor move through the tables like a small, delicious earthquake. Slide 3, estate seal, certificate of death, Marion Ellison. Issued, stamped, notarized. Gasps landed like hail. Someone said, "What?" The way a person says it when their world just nudged to a new angle they hate. In the wing, I heard the stage manager hiss, "Who loaded this?" Ria's voice, cool, licensed, answered from the deck, "Per today's version control. Check your approvals." A production note floated on screen, exactly as negotiated. Archival materials provided by Ellison Haven Outreach. The room inhaled as one organism. Audio rolled. Trent's voice, recorded in a parlor that suddenly sounded like a confession booth. Her dowry built this empire. The sentence hit like a brick wrapped in velvet. Fork stopped. A woman at the governor's table put her hand over her mouth. Faces on screen again. The Caldwell executive director laughing about optics, the development officer cooing discretion. Consent signage made it legal. Their vanity made it easy. Someone toward the front stood up, sat down, stood up again. The choreography of panic. I stepped from the corridor into the aisle. The nearest heads turned, as if the dead had decided to RSVP. No spotlight chased me. I didn't need one. Recognition rippled outward, table by table, like light moving down water. The screens froze on the obituary photo of me, smiling, 60, conveniently dead. I stopped beneath it, perfectly alive. "Good evening," I said, voice steady, unamplified, and somehow louder than their system. I was told I died. The paperwork was lovely. Nyla moved with me, 3 paces back, Zuri's hand nested in hers. If anyone called it spectacle, they'd be right. Truth is a spectacle when it's been starved. I watched eyes ricochet from the headline to my face to Nyla's profile, familiar enough to sting, and I let the math do its cruelty. I didn't accuse. The screen did. It showed dates, transfers, the notary stamp that once worked for our family office, and then worked for my funeral. It showed a memo labeled Scandal Mitigation Plan, and the line that killed me better than any accident could: proceed with simulated fatality notice. The host fumbled for the mic. The sound squealed, desperate. We will take a brief." He didn't finish. Darius was already moving down the aisle toward me, smile cracking like old paint. Up close, his cologne smelled like debt and choir robes. We stood inches apart, mother and son, history and harvest. He didn't dare touch me. He learned that lesson late, but he learned it. His mouth barely moved. The whisper carried anyway, meaner than any shout. You were supposed to stay dead. When truth finally walks into a room, it doesn't knock. It rips the hinges off. The ballroom was chaos, voices crashing, cameras flashing, the sound of money trying to reason with morality. Darius stood frozen, halfway between rage and recognition. I stepped forward, unflinching. "You call it business," I said into the nearest mic. "I call it human trafficking with fine china." The words landed like gunfire. Gasps rippled through the tables. Someone shouted for security, but no one moved. The guests, politicians, donors, partners, looked around, measuring what silence might cost them. The Caldwell's patriarch rose, face red, hand trembling as he jabbed the air. "This woman is trespassing." I turned to him. "You built your empire on the bodies of women your contracts erased. My granddaughter was one of them." He faltered, eyes darting toward the cameras, now turning his way. "That's outrageous." "Outrageous," I echoed, "is making a marriage license into a balance sheet. Outrageous is selling your son's debt with his daughter's life attached." The audience murmured, the kind of low noise that sounds like people deciding which side of history to stand on. Then Nyla's voice cut through. Clear. "Steady. He's telling the truth." She walked to the stage, Zuri's compass necklace glinting at her throat. The spotlight caught her face, tired, defiant, free. "For 10 years I was a contract. My father gave me to this family as collateral. They called it an alliance." A woman in pearls near the front whispered, "Oh my God." "I wasn't a wife," Nyla continued. "I was a ledger entry." She gestured to the screen still frozen behind us. "Family partnership agreement. Value $4 million. This is the signature of the man who raised me. The one who told me I was the family's future." Trent stood, trying to interrupt. "That's not." But the mic caught him, and every camera swung his way. Nyla's voice didn't rise, but it carried. "You controlled every dollar, every visit, every word. You told your friends my grandmother was dead. You told your board I was grateful. But I learned something under those rules. Silence isn't peace. It's punishment. The crowd erupted in low voices, half shock, half curiosity. Phones lifted. Every angle was being captured. Every lie fossilized. I took a step closer to the edge of the stage. For 8 years, they ran a charity in my name while filing a death certificate in the same breath. The same notarized signature that buried me signed a tax exemption that bought this chandelier. The chandeliers sparkled on cue, tone deaf and perfect. Behind the noise, a quiet stir, the sound of leather shoes and clipped voices moving through the side doors. Federal agents, black suits, silver badges, entered without spectacle, guided by Rhea. She'd handed over the evidence packet hours before the event began. Timing like truth is everything. An agent approached the stage, murmuring, "We'll take it from here, Ms. Ellison." "Not yet," I said softly, "Mike still live. The story deserves an ending." He nodded once and stepped back. Darius finally spoke, voice shaking. "Mother, you don't understand. It was survival. It was business." Nyla turned toward him, the crowd parting as if the air itself knew this was the moment that mattered. "You always called it that," she said. "Business." He reached out, pleading. "You had everything. You had a home." "I had a cage," she interrupted. "You didn't just sell me, Daddy." Her tone broke, then sharpened like glass. "You sold your soul." Something inside him folded. The weight of eyes, lights, cameras, it crushed whatever pride had kept him standing. His knees hit the floor, slow and hollow, like old wood giving way. Reporters shouted questions. Federal agents moved in. The Caldwell's table emptied. Chairs toppled, champagne still trembling in the glasses they abandoned. I looked out at the crowd. No longer donors, just witnesses. Tonight wasn't about revenge, I said quietly into the mic. It was about resurrection. Darius knelt there, surrounded by everything he'd built on someone else's suffering. And for the first time, I believed silence could be holy. You ever sit in a room and realize it's the first one in years that doesn't hold ghosts? That's what today feels like. Morning light spilling through the new glass panels of Ellison Haven, the scent of fresh paint and purpose mingling with flowers the volunteers arranged themselves. The ribbon is tied, the microphones waiting, the cameras humming like polite bees. But for once, I don't mind the noise. This one belongs to us. It's been 8 months since the gala. 8 months since truth tore open a ballroom and rearranged history. The Caldwells are bankrupt. Their foundation seized under federal audit. My son, the man who once signed my death certificate, is serving time under house arrest, stripped of titles, stripped of lies. I visit only once for closure, not forgiveness. You can forgive a wound. You don't forgive the knife. Today isn't about the ruins. It's about the rebuilding. The crowd gathers under the awning. Lawyers, social workers, survivors. Every woman here carries a story like a scar that healed into armor. Reporters line the fence, hungry for an ending. They'll get one, but not the kind that fits between commercial breaks. Nyla stands beside me at the podium. Her hair catches sunlight, strong, unflinching. She's wearing her mother's earrings, tiny silver teardrops that don't weep anymore. When she turns to me, I see both the girl I lost and the woman who saved us both. Zuri and Cairo sit in the front row, restless but proud. Zuri has a folder in her lap. She's been practicing something. When the crowd quiets, She rises on tiptoe to reach the mic and begins to read from the bronze plaque mounted on the front wall. Her voice is small but clear, built by the women they couldn't bury. The words hang there, simple, solid, true. The audience exhales as if they've been holding their breath since the beginning of our story. I feel tears prick, not from pain, but from proof. Proof that survival can bloom into legacy if you give it sunlight and time. When the applause fades, a reporter calls out, "Miss Caldwell, what does freedom feel like?" Nyla smiles, slow and measured. "It feels like choice," she says, "like breathing without asking permission." She glances at me, like finally learning what love sounds like when it's not bargaining. I could end the day right there, but closure deserves its own chapter. We cut the ribbon together, 2 hands, 1 past, 1 future. The doors open, and the crowd streams in. The lobby smells faintly of cedar and lemon polish, the kind of clean that promises safety. The walls are lined with portraits, not of me, not of Nyla, but of ordinary women, a teacher, a nurse, a bus driver. Beneath each frame, 1 line of testimony etched into brass. I stayed. I left. I built again. Rhea joins us by the main desk, grinning like a woman who knows paperwork can be justice too. "Full caseload already," she says. 5 women came forward this week. That's 5 beginnings. I tell her. In the courtyard, Nyla's foundation staff set up an art corner for the children. Zuri leads them. Pencils and paints everywhere. Laughter echoing off the brick. Cairo tries to fix the snack table, like it's a project worth his whole heart. For the first time, their laughter doesn't sound borrowed. It sounds inherited. As the reporters pack up, one lingers. "Mrs. Ellison," he says gently, "after everything you've endured, how would you like to be remembered?" I think of all the versions of me that existed. The businesswoman, the mother, the ghost. I think of that bridge, that tent that night when destiny looked like dust. Then I look at Nyla, alive, unafraid, standing exactly where she belongs. I smile and answer the only way truth knows how to speak. They said I was dead. Maybe I was for a while. But the dead don't fly their granddaughters home, rebuild names, and teach the living how to rise. The crowd stills. The wind shifts. And for the first time in years, I feel the world make room for the living.